Now the kidney, of course, is the most fascinating of the organs in the urinary tract. As you look at the kidney, one of the things you should notice is how rich of a blood supply this has, right? So the renal artery bringing blood in, spreading it out to every nook and cranny of the kidney, right, before recollecting it, sending it out in the renal vein. The kidneys receive somewhere between 20 and 25% of the cardiac output. Think about what that means. A quarter of the blood from every heartbeat is being sent to the kidneys. And that tells you something important is going on here, right? This really rich blood supply. We want to filter the blood, okay? And so as you follow that arterial blood supply heading out, right, you'll notice the way it's kind of fanning out here in the cortex. Remember, the outer region of an organ is called the cortex. In here is the medulla. The blood supply starts branching off into all these little clusters, all these little capillary beds, and that is called a glomerulus. Okay? The glomerulus is part of the nephron. The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. Remember what that means? It's the smallest part that completes all the functions of that organ, right? So you actually have millions of nephrons in each of your kidneys. So a very small part that does all the functions. So essentially, the nephron is where the work is happening. Right, so the nephron is made up of the glomerulus, this little knot of capillaries, and then we see all these in purple here, they're showing you these tubules. These are going to be really important in kind of formation of the urine, and we'll look at that. What I wanted to point out though, right, is that these nephrons come in a couple different types. Most of your nephrons are what are called cortical nephrons, referring to the fact that most of the nephron is up in the cortex, the outer region of the kidney. Juxtamedullary nephrons, juxtaposition, right, like against the medulla, right, has this really long loop here. These are the nephrons that are really good at concentrating urine. Now, we only have about 15% of our nephrons that are juxtamedullary. If you're a kangaroo rat living only on metabolic water produced in cellular respiration, you've got a lot more juxtamedullary nephrons. They're the ones that are really good at concentrating urine. Otherwise, they work really similarly. Most of ours are cortical. They do the job just fine. We've got a good kidney. It's just not a great kidney. It gets the job done. Now, another thing to notice here as you look at these nephrons. So the blood supply coming into the glomerulus, that little knot of capillaries, notice you have an afferent arteriole. We'll get into this. An afferent arteriole feeds that. The efferent arteriole comes out of the glomerulus and becomes what are called paratubular capillaries. I want you to keep an eye on these because what happens is we're going to filter a bunch of stuff out of the blood at the glomerulus, and then we're going to try to keep getting it back. And anytime something leaves these tubules, it can get reabsorbed. It can go back into the blood in those paratubular capillaries. So keep an eye on those. Most of the pictures from here on out kind of drop them because they kind of get in the way of what the artist is trying to show. But we'll remind you where they are, okay? So as promised, we'll get into this, right? The nephron, the functional unit of the kidney, is made up of a few different parts, right? The renal corpuscle There you go, it's spelled right there. You can spell it right. The renal corpuscle. This is going to include the glomerulus. Again, here, see the afferent arteriole coming in, feeding this capillary bed, and then the efferent arteriole leaving. You remember afferent and efferent. Anyway, what we do at the renal corpuscle is filtration. Okay, so the renal corpuscle is made up of the glomerulus. So I just made this messy, and out here, this purple, I think of it as a catcher's mitt, it's called the Bowman's capsule or the glomerular capsule. I think we're trying to get away from using people's names in all the terms, but if you hear someone say Bowman's capsule, that's what they're referring to, right? So we are going to filter things out of the blood, and then we are going to catch them in that glomerular capsule. This is the renal corpuscle. Now, just to make sure we're clear, on filtration, this is filtration just like you're making coffee in the morning, right? So you're making coffee, you have a filter, you have a mug. In that filter, you have all your coffee grounds, and then you pour water in here, right? This is like the blood in the glomerulus, okay? And some things are going to be filtered or pushed across this membrane, right? Our filter, and what comes out the other side, you thought it was called coffee, now we're calling it filtrate, right? In your mug, there's the glomerular capsule, right? So filtration, we are going to leave the big things behind, big cells and proteins and coffee grounds, right? And then what comes through are all the flavors, i.e. lots of water and ions and sugars and things like that, right? So that is filtration, pushing things out of the glomerulus and catching it in the glomerular capsule, okay? As we move on in the nephron, we have all of these tubules. Everybody got this? I can erase this amazing picture with making coffee. If not, you can always rewind, right? Okay. So from there we move into the proximal convoluted tubule, right? Also referred to as the PCT, okay? So filtrate moves through the PCT. Notice it's proximal, it's close to the glomerulus, and it is in fact convoluted, right? From there, the filtrate then enters the nephron loop. The old name was the loop of Henle. Again, I think nephron loop is a safe bet, but in case some old doctor calls it the loop of Henle, there you go. And then we get to the distal convoluted tubule, or DCT. And that is technically the end of the nephron, right, the end of the purple here. But from there, many nephrons are dumping together into what's called the collecting duct. It actually fills a lot of really similar roles to the DCT, but since many nephrons are coming into it, it's not technically part of the nephron, right? But we'll talk about it here. Now, we'll get into each of these regions in more detail, but what I want you to see here, right, was that at the renal corpuscle, we focused on filtration, squishing things out of the bloodstream, making filtrate. It's not until we're over here that we have urine, right? So we make filtrate, and it takes a lot of processing before we get urine. And what you're going to see throughout the rest of the nephron and the collecting duct is reabsorption and secretion. Yeah, we'll just erase again. Okay. So reabsorption and secretion. Okay. reabsorption refers to pulling things back out of the filtrate, right? Things that you've already dumped into Bowman's capsule, into the filtrate, into your coffee mug, and saying, no, we should keep that. So taking things out of the filtrate and putting them back in the blood. Right, so remember our whole peritubular capillaries? That's where we're going. Right? And of course from there, it's going to get collected, it ends up in the renal vein, it's back in the circulatory system, right? So things we want to keep need to get reabsorbed, right? We see reabsorption in every one of these areas. What you'll see is that a ton of reabsorption happens at the PCT, and it's like this bulk reabsorption. It's like anything we can pull back in, we're going to. Later on, as we get down towards the DCT and the collecting duct, we'll see a lot more hormonal influence, kind of fine-tuning what we're bringing back into the body. The other thing that we're following as we go through here is secretion. Now, secretion means adding things to the filtrate. Right? So this can be annoying. Students are often like, why didn't we put it in the filtrate in the first place? But you will find along different portions of the nephron that we're like, oh yeah, maybe we should get rid of this drug. Let's put that in the urine, right? Or like, oh, we need to manage pH. Let's go ahead and secrete some hydrogen, put it into the filtrate, right? So there's a variety of different things, but you're adding things to the filtrate. The way I remember this is I say, you secrete it to excrete it. Oh boy. Secrete it to excrete it. Right? So anything that you want to be in the urine when you are done that you didn't put in that filtration process at the beginning, you're going to have to do secretion to get it there. Okay, so filtration at the renal corpuscle, and then reabsorption and secretion throughout the rest of the nephron.